Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to this online policy dialogue organized by the European Policy Center and Nossa Europa to take stock of Portugal's achievements during its 6 months at the helm of the Council of the European Union. This is the final event held in the framework of the project presidency, which was launched in 2020 with the aim of connecting and engaging national capitals with decision makers as well as experts from Brussels in discussions about current EU policy priorities. In this event series, we have already looked, for example, at the Portuguese presidency's efforts to promote Europe's economic recovery and to support the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights. So today, the intention is to focus on a third key priority that the Portuguese presidency took up, which was to strengthen the strategic autonomy of a Europe open to the world. Of course, as we know, the Portuguese presidency happened at a very complicated moment in time, marked by extraordinary changes in the Union's environment. But many complex and related internal and external challenges notwithstanding, how has Portugal fared on the goals that it has set for its presidency? And in particular, how has it contributed to the Union's foreign policy during its term? To help us answer these questions, I have the great pleasure to welcome Augusto Santos Silva, Portugal's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. He will review and assess for us the achievements of his country's presidency, laying out also the work that remains to be done henceforth. The minister's speech will be followed by reactions from two distinguished experts, Shada, Senior Advisor at the European Policy Center, and Coelho, President of Nossa Europa. Comments and questions from our audience are welcome in written and any time during the event or live during our Q&A session, which is coming up towards the end of the meeting. And with that, let's get started. Minister Santos Silva, what is the legacy that the Portuguese presidency is leaving now to Slovenia? Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. And I greet everyone attending this important conference. And as you said, I will focus on our third priority, which deals with external policy in its broad sense. And the first word is a word of clarification, as perhaps the vast majority of our audience already knows. The rotating presidency of the Council is not responsible for the foreign and security policy of the European Union as such. This is a responsibility permanently held by the High Representative, Vice President of the Commission, currently Josep Borrell, and it is his responsibility to conduct the external policy of the European Union on a daily basis. And of course, at the very apex of our organization, the President of the European Council has also very important responsibilities in what regards the institutional relations between our bloc and other countries or entities. Still, there are responsibilities that belong to the rotating presidency. First, in certain areas, for instance, trade policy is also a very important instrument of our external action. And in this case, that is a responsibility of the rotating presidency to chair the Foreign Affairs Council in its formation trade. Secondly, of course, we work in a close coordination with the Commission and External Service. So, in several occasions, I chaired meetings with international partners on behalf of the High Representative. And mostly, a rotating presidency can organize events and deliver message to, in a certain way, set a certain tone also in terms of geopolitical issues. So this is an important clarification because I would say that the main achievement during this semester was not a result of a direct action of the Portuguese presidency or even of a European player. I'm referring to, as you perhaps have already guessed, to the change in the American administration. If I look retrospectively to what occurred in terms of external policy of the European Union in this semester, I would say that the single game changer was the inauguration of the Biden presidency. It's perhaps useful to remind us to remember that in the previous 4 years, we were treated not as friends, but as adversaries. And of course, this was very strange for us, because at least since the end of the Second World War, Europe and the United States are the closest allies in the world. And of course, right now, the triangulation between the European Union and the United Kingdom and the United States is key for the stability, not only of North Atlantic region, but of the world at large. So the inauguration of the Biden administration and their first messages was of a key importance to us, with concrete results. Not only Mr. Biden dedicated to Europe his first official visit abroad, but when the summit between the European Union and the United States was held this June, it produced concrete results. We decided to suspend the measures and countermeasures on the issue Boeing Airbus. We decided to launch a very important bilateral platform, the Council for Technology and Trade. We decided to launch a bilateral high-level dialogue on the issue of the relations with Russia. And we decided that until the end of this year, we should solve the remaining issues concerning, for instance, aluminium and steel tariffs. So concrete results and really a game changer, with a very important and positive spillover in bilateral agendas that are led by the European Union, that were led alone by the European Union in the previous years, and now that we can lead together with the United States. Of course, I'm referring to the climate action agenda and the fulfillment of the objectives, the goals of the Paris Agreement. So this was very important. This was not a direct result of the performance of the Portuguese presidency, but it changed radically the atmosphere and the important role European Union has to play in the world order. Then I would highlight a second point, and this really is a direct result of a choice, of an option taken in accordance, of course, with the European Council President, Charles Michel, but taken by the Portuguese presidency. I mean the summit with India. And the summit in India is, in a certain way, has a threefold value. First of all, in itself, this is the launching of a high-level political dialogue between the two largest democracies in the world, India and the European Union. Secondly, there were obstacles to overcome. The most important one was the one related to economic negotiations. They were suspended in 2013. Since 2013, no progress was obtained concerned trade and investment agreement negotiations. And of course, this is, we cannot understand this. And it is enough to think that last November, the RCEP was launched, meaning the agreement between China, Japan, Korea, all the Asian states, and Australia and New Zealand, who's absent in this sort of arrangement: United States, European Union, and India. We have to rebalance this landscape. So, fortunately, the most important single decision of the summit, the Porto summit between the European leaders and Prime Minister Modi, was the relaunch of the negotiations on a comprehensive trade agreement, on an agreement to protect investment, and on an agreement on geographical indications. But third, last but not least, the third dimension is for me the most important in terms of geopolitics. And the idea was to convince Europe, convince ourselves that we have to pay more attention to the Asia-Pacific region. And we have to pay more attention with that region, redefining it also as an Indo-Pacific region, stressing the key role India has to play in that region. And we have to pay more attention. We are currently preparing the European strategy for the Indo-Pacific region first. Then, to do so, we have to work with our friends and allies, UK, US, in order to have, I wouldn't say a unique approach, but a convergent approach to that region. And third, in that region, Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific, as you prefer, we have to multiply our partners. So the idea was not to replace China with India. The idea is to multiply the partners the European Union has in this region. So in the previous presidency, the German presidency, it was obtained an agreement, an in-principle agreement on investment deal with China. Last November, we had decided to upgrade our partnership with the Asian countries to the level of a strategic partnership. So the link which was missing was India. And our purpose in organizing the summit in Porto was to recover this link, to multiply our partners and to pay more attention to that region. So I would say, in terms of external action, if I had to choose one single achievement of the Portuguese presidency, I would not hesitate. But if you allow me a third point, a very important one, is this. UK has abandoned the European Union, but not Europe. So whenever I speak with my American friends, or whenever I have to speak in terms of North Atlantic geopolitics, I always say, guys, this is a triangle. This is not a bilateral partnership. We have three main actors that have to work together in the North Atlantic region: the United States, and Canada, of course, on one hand, United Kingdom on the other hand, and European Union on the other side of the triangle. So it is really important that it was really important for the Portuguese presidency to get the agreement on the new relationship with UK. And this was done last April. The European Parliament approved the new cooperation and trade agreement with UK. And of course, it was very interesting because of our historic ties with the United Kingdom to have this done under our presidency. Point number 4, if you allow me, I still have some time. I have 5 points. Point number 4, the relation with Africa. Europe and Africa are the two neighbors, the two continents that not only are geographically very close to each other, but also they are complementary. if you think in terms of demographics, if you think in terms of capital, if you think in terms of know-how, if you think in terms of even if economic policies and foresight thinking, you can see easily that there is a complementarity between Europe and Africa. And the two continents to a certain extent are dependent on each other. Not only because of migrations, not only because of the need to cooperate to foster development in Africa, but also because of the new issues we are addressing. Climate change, digitalization, the empowerment of women, the qualification and the employability of youngsters, and so on. So for us, it was very important to foster the enhancement of the common agenda between Europe and Africa. We did it in various ways. The most important one, of course, was the conclusion of the negotiations on the post-Cotonou agreement. This is the framework of our cooperation for the next 20 years. It's very interesting because the Cotonou agreement was signed under a Portuguese presidency in the year 2000, and 21 years later, we had the good result of seeing our Commissioner Ruperleinen for International Partnership to conclude the negotiations with the African partners and the Pacific and Caribbean region. So this is a very important achievement. And of course, the approval within our multi-annual framework, financial framework, of the new instrument for cooperation with third countries. You know that we love difficult phrases and the denominations in Europe, so we call it the Instrument for Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation, NDICI, but we are currently saying in a more simple way, the Global Europe. So funding is very important, and the work we did with the European Investment Bank was very important. Unfortunately, the pandemic did not allow for presential meetings, so we still don't have the ministerial meeting that has to prepare the summit at leaders level. The summit should be happen at year 2020 to abide by the triennial timeline that we defined in 2017 in Abidjan, but unfortunately we still have to wait for the pandemic evolution to see if we can have this ministerial meeting next fall and then the summit. But the agenda, the content is very important when we could improve it. Finally, my fifth and final point, the relations with Latin America. That is the dimension in which I am less optimistic, and I have a sense, not of failure, but of getting short in comparison with not only the objectives of the presidents, but also and mainly with the needs, the necessity Europe has. Latin America is the region in the world closest to Europe if we compare institutions, if we compare cultures, if we compare literature, if we compare the way of life of people. For instance, in the United Nations, we are very close, but on the contrary, we don't have leader summits for the last 7 years, and the main instrument that we had and we have to improve our bilateral relations is trade policy, trade agreements. And after 20 years of negotiation, the European Commission reached an agreement with Mercosur countries in July 2019. And still, we Europeans, we have not been able to conclude and ratify this agreement. And this is a failure of us. Why? First, because in economic terms, I think the agreement generates benefits for both parties. And this is the soul of a trade agreement. Secondly, because trade policy is an instrument of foreign policy. And of course, if you want to improve political relations and geopolitical relations with a third party, the fact that you have economic agreements helps a lot. And thirdly, there is here a problem of credibility of the European Union, because the European Commission did not negotiate on its behalf. The European Commission has negotiated on our behalf with a mandate that was approved and monitored by the Council. So if we don't comply with our commitments in past negotiations, what will be our credibility vis-à-vis the partners with which we want to celebrate new negotiations? So this is also an issue of credibility. But why did this happen? Because there was a problem, and we have to recognize this problem. Some issues were legitimately raised, both by European Parliament, and by members of the European Parliament, and by several member states concerning the environmental dimension of the agreement. So the role of the Portuguese presidency, as presidency of the Council, was to contact our friends from Mercosur countries and say, please, there are these issues that are being raised in Europe about deforestation, on biodiversity, on the commitment to the Paris Agreement, and we need to clarify these issues. So do you accept to negotiate an additional instrument in order to clarify our commitments? They said yes. And we are still waiting that the proposal of this additional instrument from Europe can be presented to our partners. Of course, this is a job for the European Commission. The European Commission is working hardly on this, and I hope that during the Slovenia presidency, this additional instrument can be presented and negotiated with the Mercosur agreement. So I would say that we need to give an impetus to our relations with Latin America. Of course, our cooperation in terms of the combating COVID is very important for that. The fact that this Link, the first high-speed cable linking South America and Europe, is also very important because of the flow of data and the data economy. But still, I do believe that we have to solve this pending issue we have to Latin America on what regards our economic negotiations. And I wish all the luck to Slovenia on this. I did not speak of all dimensions of the external policy, but I would highlight these 5 points as the main events and results that were obtained during this semester. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. You haven't spoken of all dimensions, but you have given us a very rich overview. And I think this offers us an excellent basis for an interesting and lively exchange for the rest of our time together. The first in line to react to your presentation, however, are our two esteemed experts, and I would like to first invite Ms. Islam to give her take on what we've heard from you. And in particular, I wanted to to ask you, Shada, what were, in your opinions, the milestones in the past 6 months that have contributed to enhancing the EU standing on the international arena, and to what extent has the Portuguese presidency played a role in this regard?
Thank you very much, Corina. Wonderful to see you, Minister. I think the Minister has been very accurate and very honest and modest in what he has set out for us in the last 20 minutes. And I'll just give a few of my comments and perhaps a few suggestions for the Slovenian presidency and the External Action Service. The one point, obviously, Minister, that you didn't refer to is the European Union's reputation as a union of values. And that has geopolitical implications, if I may say, because as a norm exporter, as a norm disseminator, when we do not practice what we preach at home, and we see that there are several countries in our union which are in flagrant breach of some of our very, very sacred values, that obviously has an impact on the European Union's standing abroad. Geopolitically, I think the Minister has actually pointed to some of the very important milestone achievements. I'm just going to reverse the order slightly. I'm going to start with India, because I think on the geopolitical stage, of course, Minister, the return of America is back mantra of Joe Biden has been important. But I think if you look at the geopolitical puzzle, the relationship that you have, I would say, really encouraged with India is very important for the broader Indo-Pacific as well. So it's quite, I think, important that Prime Minister Narendra Modi, of course, he couldn't travel because of the pandemic that was in such a devastating mode in those weeks and months that we've lived through, but he did make the time for a virtual summit. And you're absolutely right that there were these important outcomes in terms of restarting the trade talks, having a negotiation on a comprehensive investment agreement, resilient supply chains, and also a connectivity partnership, which I think is very important as well. Going on, I would urge the EU to start looking more seriously than it has so far when it comes to Indian and South African, and by now really major demands for a patent waiver for the production of vaccines. I think this is going to remain a very important issue for India and many developing countries. I would also urge the European Union to, when it looks at India and when it engages with India, not just to see it as a counterweight to China, which is sometimes a simplistic vision that people have, not you, Minister, you were very clear about that, but many people see it like that, but also to see India as part of a broader, bigger picture of South Asia. South Asia together is almost 2 billion people. If you bring together Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, the Maldives, this is a huge region. And engaging more with South Asia, and EPC has brought out a brief that says exactly how this can be done. I think this would be a very important message that the EU could send. The Indo-Pacific is very important, you're right. ASEAN partnership is very important, but we cannot neglect the wider South Asian region. And I think this is something that taking forward. Now, it's easy to start talks. We've seen that with China, we've seen that with Mercosur. It's more difficult to bring them to a conclusion. And India will find it, I think, problematic, as will the EU, to engage on many issues like cars, exports of alcohol, pharmaceuticals, visas for Indian telecommunication experts. So we have, let's say, quite a challenging task ahead to get it through the European Parliament. So patience and efforts will be required. Now, the EU-US transatlantic relationship, America is back, is very, very important. Obviously, I think the danger there is that we believe that we're aligned as US and EU on every single issue in the world. But the fact is that we're also competitors in many, many areas, including, of course, Minister, in the Indo-Pacific as well. And I think we will have to stay the course to keep the European Union on its path to open strategic autonomy, and not to fall back into the comfortable partnership of being a junior partner in this relationship. So this is very important. And I think the fact that we're coming together so warmly is also obviously because of China and the challenge the test that China poses for us. But there also, we are not totally aligned with the American view of China as an existential threat or an adversary. We prefer to talk in terms of systemic rival and competitor. So I think there will be, if I could say so, hiccups in this relationship, and we should be very aware of it. Now in Africa, I confess that you've been more, let's say, upbeat than I am. I was really looking forward, and I remember you talked at the Irish Foreign Affairs Council in the start of your presidency, and there was this hope of having an agreement with a summit with Africa. So I'm frankly very disappointed that this has not taken place. I think this is important that we do move forward now on having a partnership. You can call it a strategic partnership, a partnership of equals, the word doesn't matter, but that we actually have a conversation on many of the issues that you've talked about, and not just on migration. Africa has many choices now. It didn't before. It is less dependent on aid, more dependent on trade. So I think we will have to step up our courting of Africa if we are to convince the leaders there to actually come and talk to us and engage with us on all the myriad issues that you have pointed to. So my disappointment is stronger there than perhaps yours. And you're right that we have a post-Cotonou agreement. But that's not the entire story. Our relationship is broader than just trade. And finally, I do share your view, and I have to say, this is very important that we are in partnership with Britain as well when it comes to geopolitics. Global Britain is a competitor, I have to say, for the EU. It's making us more intense, and a good competition, constructive competition is good. But we can also partner, and we should partner, especially when it comes in the Indo-Pacific, because in many ways, Global Britain enhances the EU and adds to the European Union's geopolitical profile. So I'll end there, Corina. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shada. I'll move straight to Mr. Coelho because time is of the essence today. Mr. Coelho, what are, in your opinion, the successes of the Portuguese presidency, but also the files where maybe you would have liked or you would have hoped that this presidency does more or better, especially in terms of external action?
Thank you so much, Corina. Let me start thanking Minister Silva for being with us. It's a privilege in the last day of the Portuguese presidency, in a very difficult schedule of the minister, to get the time to be with us. Thank you so much for that honor. First, I think it's fair to say to the minister, congratulations, because I think globally the presidency was a good presidency. And if I have to identify three moments, three issues, I would say India, European Union. It was a very good initiative from the Portuguese presidency. The minister acknowledged the fact it would be better with the presidential meeting. We know Prime Minister Modi could not be here for the pandemic reasons in India. But anyway, it was very good that the meeting, even in a virtual way, took place. And in my opinion, it is one of the greatest moments of this presidency. Secondly, the European climate law. Minister was humbled to say it was not only a success of Portuguese presidency. Of course, it is not, because the legislative process, it is not it is not built in 6 months. There were a lot of other presidencies working, but it was during the Portuguese presidency we succeed to have the final agreement between the European Parliament and the Council, and to have a law. I know there is a lot of controversy, mainly for people who say they are not in line with the Paris Agreement commitments. But to speak frankly, globally, it is a good achievement. It's better to have this European climate law than not having agreement at all. And third, then blocking on the Conference of Future of Europe. I think it was not easy. there were a lot of people saying probably it could not succeed having an agreement, and the Portuguese presidency got that, and congratulations for that. Of course, there are things they were not so successful. I don't want to blame the Portuguese presidency because it was not only from the Portuguese presidency. It was something we could see before, and unfortunately we are going to see after the Portuguese presidency. I'm speaking about what I call the proclamatory policy of the Council. Council is, it's very easy to make statements, to approve declarations, and not so easy to approve decisions. And in some cases, those kind of statements Council does, they are not directly linked with European competencies. Let me give you concrete examples. The Social Summit, it was a very important initiative from the Portuguese presidency. A lot of the targets of the goals, I'm speaking about the employment rate, about the difference between women and men, about the education, the preschool education for young children between 1 and 5 years old, professional training to adults, taking out 50 million people from poverty, and so on. The biggest parts of these concrete goals don't depend on the European competencies. They depend on the member states. And I'm afraid we are taking for granted the idea we are going to fulfill these promises. But it is not up to the European institutions to do that. And I think it's risky when the Council promise things they cannot fulfill. It's up to the member states. Another example is the digital certificate. I think it is very important, the digital certificate, but we are now living in Portugal, already a decision from Germany. Germany are not going to recognize the digital certificate regarding people coming from Portugal, going from Portugal to Germany. Why? Because the regulation establish the digital certificate, but they don't force the member states to accept. It's up to each member state to accept or not. So the success of this European tool depends on the member states. If there are some member states, some important member states not accepting or not implementing or not applying the digital certificate, it is not going to be a success. And I was also disappointed by the fact we could not grant the approval by the Council during the Portuguese presidency of the recovery and resilience plans. I know the presidency made a lot of effort working with the European Parliament on the concrete regulations to be able to apply that, but the Commission has already give green light to a lot of those plans. There are still 3 member states without a plan, and we could not have the final decision, the final approval in the Council during the Portuguese presidency. And for me, and I think for a lot of Portuguese people, it was a little bit of this disappointment. So there were a lot of issues. I agree with what Shada said about the European of values, the Europe of values. We could speak about Hungary and Poland and so on. But to speak frankly, there depend on the presidency and things that don't depend on the presidency. The presidency cannot take decisions on behalf of the Council. They can help to grant the compromises, the agreements among the member states and in the legislative process between the member states and the Parliament, but it is not to the presidency to take the decisions. Minister Augusto Silva cannot alone take the decisions in Europe, or the Prime Minister Antonio Costa. Is a process with all the partners, and it's not so easy. Anyway, I think there were a lot of achievements, and Minister Silva, thank you so much, and congratulations. But there are also some areas where there is a feeling of disappointment, and the idea we could have be more successful and more efficient than what we have done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coelho. I would now like to invite our participants to express their interest to come in with questions or comments. And while we collect these questions, I will give the Minister the opportunity to respond, but also follow up with some questions. And we could, for example, start from the game changer that you mentioned. Minister, you said that President or Mr. Biden's arrival in the Oval Office was really a game changer, for which you're not actually responsible. And indeed, in an article published in January in Financial Times, you were also quoted saying that you are confident that under President Biden, dealings will go back to the way they were. So to what extent, also given what we've heard from Shada, to what extent is the EU and US back to business as usual, and to what extent friction lines persist? What are the biggest differences between the EU and the US, which could be important in the future?
Thank you very much. First of all, I think that the most important issue is, of course, security. So the emphasis on the role of NATO was the very important first message delivered by President Biden, and it was very important. As you know, President Trump referred to NATO as an obsolete organization. Then President Macron referred to it as being in brain death, and this is not helping. So it is very important for us and for the others to state clearly that we have an alliance, a military and political alliance, and its name is NATO. I must say, by the way, that in Portugal, when we refer to the strategic autonomy of Europe, we are emphasizing mainly the economic dimensions. When we speak of security and defense, we usually avoid the use of the adjective strategic, because it could be misunderstood by our partners. We don't belong to two military or organizations, EU and NATO. We belong to one military organization, NATO. That's our feeling. But of course, the second result is the impetus that the coming back of the Americans, to quote President Biden, means to several very important multilateral agendas and to multilateralism as such. So this is very important. But as Shada rightly mentioned, we don't have the same interests in every single issue. And still, we have to understand better what is the economic policy of President Biden and what means by American in his economic policy. We have some divergence and even some opposite interests in terms of trade and in terms of investments. Seen from a European point of view, the American economy is still rather protectionist. I'm not exaggerating that much, and I'm not using hard words, but still from our perspective, we would say that our economy is more open to international competition and to international trade than the Americas. But it's completely different to deal with difficult issues as friends or to deal with difficult issues as adversaries. So it's a game changer, rightly said. And I also agree with Shada Islam when she says that it is very important to keep clear that this is a partnership in which not necessarily the United States leads and Europe plays the role of a junior partner. This even a certain difference between attitudes and cultures may help the United States. We as Europeans, we can speak now with China in a way that is different from the way America has to speak with China, and this difference can help both America and China to at least manage their conflicts in a way that does not provoke the disruption of the international community. If I may make some other comments, I would say that the fact that we decided to relaunch the economic negotiations with India does not mean that we ignore the complexities of these negotiations. That's why we decided to launch. In several dimensions, there are structural differences between the two economies. But now I think we understand better than we did in 2013 the need to these negotiations. And I'm in a European Policy Center and the Nossa Europa platform. I'm a foreign minister, so my point of view, my window is the geopolitics. And again, we cannot diminish the importance of the RCEP and the challenges it puts to us. Last November, Australia, Korea, Japan, all the Asian countries and China and New Zealand signed an agreement. Mm-hmm. And this is also, in a certain way, a game changer. Mm-hmm. So we have to understand that if we want to play the game, we need to go to the arena and play the game, not only, as Carlos Coelho was saying, proclaiming values or using grand sentences. I understand the points made by Carlos Coelho, and I would like also only to point out a theme that is very important for the veterans of the European studies. You know, we have different methodologies in Europe concerning the decision making. Mm-hmm. We need consensus in many domains, in the European Council functioning, for instance. We need unanimity in foreign defense policies and what relates to tax systems. We need qualified majority, so there are different methods for our decision-making process. And then we have other methods of coordination and cooperation within the European Union. We can, some member states can embark in their own platforms or agendas. We call this the enhanced cooperation. And in what regards the national competences with internal security, with health, or with social policy, we use the method of what we call the open coordination. And this is the method that applies to social policy. So we did not define compulsory rules, but we defined targets and we engaged ourselves as such in proceeding in our own way towards those targets. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I do want to press all of you a little bit more on some of these issues, but I have one participant who has raised her hand. So I want to invite at this point Tanya Milewska to pose her question or make her comment. Tanya, are you there? Tanya? Okay. She's not responding. So going back to some of the issues that have been raised. One question for whoever.
Can you hear me
Hello,
now?
Tanya, are you there?
Here, yeah.
Oh, okay, please go ahead.
I was waiting for your side to activate.
Yeah, go ahead, we hear you.
Thank you. So I'm Tanya Milewska from the Macedonian News Agency. I have a question for the Minister on North Macedonia and the statement by the Portuguese Secretary of State that was given for the Bulgarian media yesterday, and that caused a diplomatic scandal in North Macedonia. And I would like you to set the record straight. So did the Secretary of State say that the North Macedonian language used to be a part of the Bulgarian language, and was that a part of the Portuguese proposal that you put forward to Sofia and Skopje? So I would like you really to set the record straight on what was included in that proposal, and do you stand by what your Secretary of State said in the Bulgarian media? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Milewska. To that, I will add a number of other questions, and then I will let you, each of you choose whichever you want to address. First, because we spoke of the United States, what are the prospects of a transatlantic approach to Russia also? Because I think this has not yet really come forth from your interventions. And also, speaking of Africa, what are the prospects of the EU-India Free Trade Agreement and the next steps ahead? And finally, because we spoke of unanimity and of democratic problems, I wanted to ask whether the EU's unanimity requirement is actually the clue to finding a solution when it comes to dealing with democratic backsliding in the member states. So there you have several questions, and maybe I will go back to Shada and ask her to cherry pick among those in response.
Thank you very much, Corina. I will look at the broader geopolitical question that you asked me as well. And initially, and I'll say that over the last 6 months, in fact, despite the pandemic and despite, I have to say, Minister, not your fault at all, but rather messy image of the EU when it came to dealing with the question of vaccine solidarity. There were episodes of vaccine nationalism, vaccine hoarding, and then of course a more generous offer of donations. And so there was a geopolitical, if I may say so, erosion at that point of the EU standing, because people had believed in the solidarity manifesto and mantra that we had heard before. But despite that, I think that in a sense, the European Union has captured the essence of a changing world. I would say better than the Biden administration has, because it's not just to do with the rise of China or the importance of India, but also the need for a neighborhood which around the EU includes, if I may say so, the Middle East and the Southern Mediterranean countries and the Balkans, the need and Russia, the need for the EU to actually focus very much on making sure that there is peace and prosperity in its neighborhood. And I think that remains an overarching challenge. When we go to the Indo-Pacific and we go to the Asia-Pacific or Africa, we have to make sure that, first of all, the ring around us is also at peace and prospering, so that we can actually hold our heads up high and say we're doing all we can in our neighborhood. And when it comes to QMV and the need for maybe stronger voices when it comes to backsliding on democracy and values, I couldn't agree with you more, Corina. We need to take that action. It's not just enough to be selective in our outrage over the erosion of democracy and values. We need to take an overall picture and decide once and for all, or at least start the conversation about who are we, what do we really stand for, and are we a club of democracies, or is it really divided into the so-called illiberal democracies and the liberal democracies? That conversation is going to become more difficult, of course, during the Slovenian presidency for reasons that we know.
Mr. Coelho.
To speak frankly, I think the most important right now is to listen to the answers of Minister. I would love to still debate with him. There are a lot of issues relating to the Portuguese presidency, relating the last barometer. It's very important for the conference on the future of Europe, because so far as I understood, a lot of citizens understand the European Union needs more competencies. And among all the member states, the Portuguese people have the highest rate of positive answers regarding that. So there is a demand of more Europe and not less Europe, but it's changing our debate. I think the most important right now is to listen the minister and his answers on the questions were asked.
Okay, Minister, back to you. And since we are approaching the end of our meeting, I will also add as a final question, what are your expectations for the incoming Slovenian presidency? What do you expect now that when you pass the baton in terms of policy and goals?
Corina, you are asking for a diplomatic answer.
So thank you very much. Starting by the end, of course, I wish all the best to the Slovenian presidency. And I think they have a window of opportunity to make a blueprint, mainly concerning the enlargement process. We reached to launch the intergovernmental conferences in accordance with the new methodology with Serbia and Montenegro, but we didn't reach to overcome the impasse, the stalemate in what regards the process of the approval of the negotiating framework with Albania and North Macedonia. And I think that after the incoming or the forthcoming elections in Bulgaria, there is perhaps a window of opportunity in the rest of summer and the beginning of fall that the Slovenia presidency can use to try to overcome this stalemate. So I wish
here again, however, unanimity is the problem.
Yes, but you know that unanimity is also a very important builder of consensus. Carlos Coelho was EP for a long time, so knows this much better than myself. But at least the Portuguese understanding is that the right of the fact that we need unanimity, so practically the right of veto, is also the obligation to contribute to a consensus. In Portugal, it would be unacceptable that our country used instrumentally the right of veto to impede that a consensus in the European Union could be formed. I would be criticized by him, he would be criticized by me. We cannot imagine that a country can put itself in the situation of I will use my right of veto to impede that the Council or the European Council forms a decision, takes a decision. So this is unanimity is important because in some issues there is a national interest and we have to respect the national interests of each other. But you cannot think of unanimity without thinking of the obligation to contribute to the decision process, to contribute to a consensus. Am I right, Carlos, or am I not? Okay, good. So, coming to the three questions, we are not in favor of accelerating the process of reviewing the treaties. It's always a very complicated and sophisticated process with many incidents meanwhile. And you have the duty of exhausting all the possibilities contained in the current treaties. And the most important possibility to give more flexibility to our decision process are the so-called passerelle clauses that allow us to move to non-unanimity in certain fields that are very important. You know, we have the 5 principles guiding our relations to Russia, and I think these 5 principles are still updated. First, respect for the Minsk agreements. Secondly, the fact that we have to reinforce our resilience, the resilience of our democracies vis-à-vis Russia and Russian actions. Third, the enhancement of our cooperation with our Eastern partners, the countries in Eastern Europe. Fourth, a selective engagement or cooperation with Russia in areas of mutual interest. And fifth, the idea of improving the people-to-people contacts and the civil society to civil society communication. And I still believe that these 5 principles form a good and practical guideline. Of course, we are in a very low level of our bilateral relations as European Union with Russia. And of course, we think that the main responsibility belongs to Russia. But still, I was quite optimistic with the outcome of the Biden-Putin summit. I always say, you know, that diplomats and foreign ministers have this reputation of being lazy people that don't want to deal with problems, but prefer rituals to problems. But still, the point is that when things are more difficult, then you have to put politics in this, and you have to work to speak to each other. And this is the main role of foreign policy and foreign ministries. And finally, the question put by the Macedonian's news agency. Let me be very clear. You cannot expect that diplomats or politicians are experts in linguistics. So we are not using in all seconds of all minutes of all hour of all days, using immediately the adequate, precise terms from a scientific or analytical point of view. So when my vice minister referred to the Macedonian language, she wanted to refer to the Macedonian language. And what we consider the proposal that we presented to North Macedonia was accepted by North Macedonia, that we presented to Bulgaria, and I think that Bulgaria can accept in the near future. And the proposal that was circulated among all the 27 member states is very clear. We speak of the Macedonian language, and we propose that by unilateral declarations that can be, if needed, supported by a council declaration, each country defines its position. The Macedonian language is the language defined by according to the Macedonian, the Constitution of the Republic of North Macedonia, and it was codified in 1945, if I'm right. But the precise terms are very well worded, enunciated in our written declaration. And of course, if you want to know the position of the Portuguese presidency, please read the text. If not, we are in a certain way doing a kind of police of language that does not help to find solutions. The this issue is too emotional, and we have to put some rationality in this. And the best way to put rationality in this is to consider the written text, because in the written text we can carefully word and we have the experts helping us in this wording. I'm not sure if during this 1 hour conversation, a very pleasant conversation, I used the concepts, the precise concepts in all domains. I'm a humble sociologist, not a guy that pretends to know everything of every issue.
Right. Well, and I hope this answer is satisfying to Tanya. We have unfortunately exhausted the time allocated for our meeting today. So I would like to thank our audience for their participation, and especially to the Minister and our experts for making time in their busy agendas to be with us today and to share in such a frank and open manner their thoughts about the performance of Portugal presidency. I think I cannot but also add my congratulations to Portugal for how it has handled the presidency over these past 6 months. And of course, I believe we all want to wish good luck to the Slovenians beginning tomorrow. Many thanks again, and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.